Hi, I'm Chris Brogan. I'm CEO of Owner Media Group. You're listening to the Amplified Expert Podcast with David Jalen. He is probably one of 4 people on the earth far more handsome than me.
Welcome to the Amplified Expert Podcast. Your business, your life, loud and clear. Make more money, get more clients, and spread your message faster so you can live the life that is true to who you really are. And now, your amplified host, David Jalen.
Hey, yo! Welcome to the Amplified Expert Podcast, the show that helps you build a business that's true to who you really are. This is David Jalen, your humble host, and no, I cannot take any credit for that super sweet intro. Matter of fact, hopefully he won't sue me. That is the signature introduction used by the $100 MBA show by today's guest, Omar Zenhom, which is an awesome intro. Omar was an educator for 13 years. He attended Wharton Business School but dropped out of total frustration to build the $100 MBA, which is an awesome program. We'll dig into that later. He is on a mission to revolutionize business education forever. He's also the host, the creator of 2 very, very successful podcasts, the $100 MBA show, which is a daily 10-minute business lesson show. And it also won iTunes Best of 2014 podcast. That is quite an accomplishment. He also is the host of Webinar Ninja, which is a weekly podcast about teaching, selling, and communicating effectively using webinars. Omar is killing it, but more importantly, he's very tall and quite a handsome man. Omar, thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David, for that very nice intro. It's great to be here, and thanks for the warm welcome.
Oh, man, it is good to have you here because you are on fire in so many ways. You've got a lot going on. You've had tremendous success. You have boundless energy. And it would be easy for me today to want to dig into podcasts with you because, again, you've had a lot of success with it. And I happen to love podcasts as a platform for experts and coaches and speakers. But today, I want to get into webinars.
Sounds good, man. I'm ready. Love podcasting as well, but webinars is a huge love of mine as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And, and that kind of leads me into my first question, is why are webinars such a good platform for, in this case, the case of who's listening on our show, for coaches, consultants, and other experts out there?
That's an awesome question, and it's a question I've been trying to answer for about 16 months now. It's since I've been working on this Webinar Ninja project. And for me, the evidence has shown that there's nothing that will allow you to build trust and connect with your audience effectively better than webinars. It's the closest thing you can get to, that approximates meeting somebody in person and coaching them one-on-one over a cup of coffee in real life. So I think webinars are really, really just starting to grow right now. In a lot of ways, they're very undervalued in the business world. And everybody I know and that I've spoken to, that I've worked with, that have been using our software, people from Michael Poor to users that are in small businesses, they've just seen tremendous results with webinars because it's just a great way to connect with your audience, build trust quickly, and a way for you to be able to not only be able to sell your products, but also just to add value to your community in a high value way. They say the best way to convert on Facebook ads is through a webinar because people see a very high perceived value because you're spending time with them, answering their questions and teaching them live versus maybe an ebook or a blog post or maybe even a video, which is one way. With a webinar, you have that interaction and you allow people to give and take. And that's where real learning comes from. You mentioned I'm an educator for a very long time, and that's where education takes place is when I'm able to give you something, there's input and there's output.
Yeah, that's nice. I mean, I couldn't concur more. I'm often, in the work that I do, sometimes I'm a little blunt when it comes to helping consultants and coaches get the word out there, because I'm a big believer that you can't sit behind a website or you can't sit behind an ebook, that you have to find the venues that really allow people to experience who you are, your personality, what you're about, just hearing your voice. So yeah, I couldn't agree more that webinars are a great way to achieve that. Probably the only thing that beats it is showing up in person or being live on the stage. So
yeah, exactly. And I think you touched on a very important point that, we're trying to build trust here, especially if you're a coach or a consultant. People want to get to know you. They want to see if they can work with you. And the best way to do that is to give them a taste of that through a webinar. And it allows people to really understand what you're all about, what your philosophy is, and they can picture in their head what the experience is when it comes to working with you. And then, they're able to pay for your services with confidence once they've kind of worked with you through a webinar.
I heard you mention something recently that I wanted to ask you about. Because most of the time, I think, I'm making a big assumption here, but from my vantage point, we usually think of webinars around selling something, and certainly we'll touch on that as well. But, you had mentioned the importance of webinars just in content creation in general. So, with so many choices that we have, there's blog posts, right? There's creating videos, there's podcasts, newsletters, and of course, webinars. So, when there's all these choices, and most of us feel like we have too much to do to begin with, right? So, where do webinars fit in the mix as far as you're concerned?
In my experience, I think webinars really is the ultimate content creation tool, and I'll tell you why. One of the reasons why is because you're getting them off an app or a device, and you're getting them to a homepage, a place where they can register and use their email to register for the webinar. And a lot of people are more than happy to register for a webinar because they see the value in it. I get to sit for an hour or maybe even less with the host, where I can ask questions, where I can get a live lesson, something they would normally pay for. Usually people pay for these things. And if they can get it for free, they're able to do that. Now, remember that you're going to get their email address and their name, their contact information, and it's going to be a credible email because they're going to want the information. They're registering for a course, and they're going to want the information, so they're going to give you their best email, as well as the fact that if for some reason they don't show up, you still can follow up with them. So that's one point that's very, very big. It's a huge list builder. I mean, I had an episode recently, I think it was episode 5 for Webinar Ninjas podcast. We talk about how it's done for some really great companies and organizations like Podcast Movement, who have a huge national conference, and they wanted to, create buzz, sell tickets, but they also wanted to use it to get to know their audience, to get to know their speakers. And the audience got to know the speakers through these webinars, and they were able to build their email list like nothing else because of that. The other thing is webinars are fantastic because they could be repurposed in so many ways. Once you've done it once live, you could take that live recording and it could be a opt-in. It could be a way for you to, sell the replay, or even just give it away for free, and build your email list that way. And at the same time, you can also have people just create webinars or lessons and set them out as evergreen webinars. So you can create a video on a lesson of some sort and just have that as an opt-in where people can just watch this recorded webinar. And what we're doing with Webinar Ninja, our software, is something a little bit new, a little bit dynamic, where even if they're watching a recorded webinar, they can send in questions, and you can get those questions in your dashboard, and you can still interact with them even though you're not actually physically on the webinar. You can have the option of joining the chat if you'd like, and just let the video play, but you can also just follow up later via email. So you could still have interaction even when it's on autopilot. So there's so many factors where you can utilize content in so many different ways. Video is an incredible medium, and there's so many ways to get started. On today's episode of Webinar Ninja, I talk about, the title of the episode is Lights, Camera, Action. We talk about, how to present yourself on video. What are your options? You could use your screen, use PowerPoint slides, use a combination of both. And part of our mission with Webinar Ninja is to also educate people and give them the tools, give them the templates, give them the training they need so they feel comfortable in front of camera. Because, again, because of the production value and because of the perceived value of webinars, people are more inclined to consume that content and give up their email address to be a part of your community.
Yeah, man. It's amazing because I've noticed the same thing. So many people talk about list building. How do I build my list? How do I do it? And I have noticed exactly what you just said, and that is that I'm not, for whatever reason, people are much more inclined to opt in rather easily for webinar content than other types of content. And I don't know if it'll always be that way, but today that's the way it is. And so yeah, I've seen it as a great list building tool.
Yeah, and what's the advantage of a webinar is that your whole goal as an entrepreneur, as somebody who's helping somebody else, a coach or anybody else who's trying to offer their services or information, is you want to give that audience member a win. You want to make sure that you give them something that they can try and they can see that, yes, this person is a credible source, they're an authority, they know what they're talking about. And a webinar is the fastest way to do it. You send out an ebook. How many of those people read that ebook, take the time to read it and implement it? That takes time. Even, a video course can take a bit of time. I've tried all these things and I still have some of them in different forms because, I have people that like to read, I have people like to watch video courses. But I feel like the webinar is like that model just times 10 because you're just really, really capitalizing on the fact that you're there, you're teaching, you're presenting, and you're offering some great value. And people just respect that. They like that. And let's not forget that we're still human beings. We like the human connection. We like to learn in the traditional way from a teacher. And I feel like there's a lot of things you can learn other than just the content. The way you deliver, the way you teach, and the way you present yourself is of value as well.
Yeah. So what are some of the components of a great effective webinar?
Well, that's a great question. And I think that a lot of people that are successful at webinars see webinars as a form of a live workshop or a public speech, if you will. It's not, you're not on stage in front of thousands of people, but you are giving some sort of formatted lesson or workshop. So it's good to plan. And, I use some terminology from the education world where it's good to have a lesson plan. And, we talk about this on the podcast. We include this in our training in Webinar Ninja, where you have to make sure that you have a format and you let your audience know what the format is so they have expectations. So if you're going to take questions at the end, let them know that's when you're going to take questions so they know that you're not ignoring their questions. Let them know what they're in store for. Make sure that you are giving as much value as possible. A lot of people make the mistake where they feel like they have to spend half their time giving their backstory. You don't need to give your backstory. You gain credibility with what you can offer them. That's how you gain their credibility. They can go to your About page if they want to. It's good to spend some time, spend a few minutes talking about your story, how you got there, the reason why you're offering this value. But spend most of the time with giving them the best content you can so you can be able to earn their trust. And that's my advice to people is to, have a plan, have a format, have a lesson plan, know what to expect, communicate that to your audience when you're starting the webinar, and make sure that you capitalize on value.
Man, I couldn't agree with you more about the whole bio thing, and that will kill a webinar fast. I've seen webinars where people have just droned on and on, and yeah, I mean that's definitely a killer. Like you said, touch on that lightly and get into the content,
and see if you can find a way to make it applicable to the lesson. So if I'm going to teach for example, a webinar on how to groom your cat, right? I'm going to maybe tell a story about my first cat, and how a mess it was and whatever. And my backstory has something to do with the content of today. So it's not a complete, kind of waste of time or something that people would just fast forward through. You got to remember that people will make decisions very quickly and they make their impressions very quickly. So you want to win them over as quickly as possible.
Yeah, nice. That is great advice right there. But now we know webinars are used for selling as well, right? So before I ask you that question, let me ask you this. Whether you're creating a content webinar or, you're selling a product or program, in your opinion, should you always have some kind of call to action on the webinar?
I believe so. I think that everybody, and this doesn't even come from the business side of me. It comes from the education side of me. Like when I was a teacher, when I was a professor, you don't end a lesson with, that's the end. You tell them what's up next. This is what you have to do. This is your homework. This is what I want you to do. And people are waiting for the next step. You always want to know what's happening next because you want to be left hanging, So you should definitely have a call to action, even if it's a content type of situation where you're just giving a great lesson or you're doing Q&A. Tell them, hey, listen, go to this link, download this PDF, and we're going to have another webinar next week on this topic, or email me your questions, or email me your thoughts on this area, or put some comments below. Something has to have some sort of call to action because you have to have action followed by learning. Learning is only done when we actually do things. You have to give input, but they have to give output as well. And that's how people comprehend and actually master what you're teaching.
Yep, that's awesome advice right there. And back to the selling, again, people, we've heard a lot of bloviating statements out there about, making a ton of money on webinars, and certainly you can. I've had effective webinars, some not so effective. That's kind of the way it goes. But there is a big promise that some of the gurus out there make about selling on webinars. So I really want your opinion about what you see as some of the biggest mistakes people are making when they try to sell on a webinar.
I think the biggest mistake is not being transparent. You need to be transparent with your audience. Once they start to feel like you're doing something that they're not expecting, like you say one thing and then something else happens, like this is supposed to be a learning experience, but it's turning into a sales exercise. That's when you start losing trust and people will start rolling their eyes. You're going to get some sales because people will be genuinely interested in what you offer, but you might lose a lot of people along the way, a lot of trust. So one of the techniques that I think is really, really effective, I've tried it myself, and I learned this from Michael Port, who's one of our beta testers of Webinar Ninja. He's a huge, heavy user of webinars. He does his whole immersion program using webinars. He does all his sales on webinars. And what he does is very, very effective. I share this chat I have with him on the Webinar Ninja podcast. And to sum it up, when he does webinars, he does 2 webinars. He does one webinar. Let's say, for example, the webinar's today. And at the start of the webinar, it says, today we're going to teach a lesson on this topic, how to write a script for your speech, because he has a course on heroic public speaking. So how to write a script for your speech. This is today's lesson. Tomorrow, I'm going to give you a full webinar on this course that can really teach you how to do it to the next level, as well as all the other things that are included in the course on how to be a heroic public speaker. But today we're going to talk about this lesson. If you're interested in the course, you're already registered for tomorrow's webinar automatically. Just show up at this time. I'll send you a link at the end. And he just goes into the lesson. He sets up expectations. People know that, all right, I can relax. Today I'm going to learn something about how to write a script. And even if somebody interjects and says, is this going to be in the lesson? Is this going to be in the course? Is this part going to have a workbook in the course? And he'll interrupt them and say, great question, but save it for tomorrow's webinar. Today we're going to talk about this topic. We're sticking to the content. And he goes through the whole lesson. And at the end, he just says, guys, I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Here's some free workbooks. Tomorrow at this time, we're having the webinar about the course, and we're going to get into all the details of the course, and you can ask all your questions then. So people go home, they have a chance to absorb the information they just learned. They appreciate and respect Michael. They see him as an honest person that really wants to give them value and is not really just after their wallets. And then they show up to the next day. And what's beautiful about this is that when they go to the next webinar, everybody that shows up is seriously interested. They are buyers. They're not looking to kick tires. And he can go to town now. He can just say, okay, this is what the course is all about, and he can feel free to sell it without any hindrance or feeling that he's doing something that they're not expecting. Today is a sales call. They know that. They know they're coming to ask questions about the course. He's going to tell them the price. He's going to tell them what's included. He's going to tell them what's the special offer for today when you're on the webinar, and he can do it in a very comfortable way, and he closes at an incredible conversion rate because people love to know what they're going to expect, and they get what they expect, and they are willingly paying for a product that they signed up for. And I feel like that's just an incredible strategy. I've tried it myself, and it works great. And it allows people to know what they're expecting. At the same time, you get to fully take advantage of that second webinar and spend that answering questions and selling your product.
Wow, I absolutely love that model. Absolutely love that model. I'm going to have to try that because that is amazing, because really what it does is it takes the pressure off of everybody, right?
Yeah,
I mean, the pressure's off the people who are attending because they know, well, today is all about content. It takes the pressure off the presenter. There's no angst about when do I start lead the offer into the presentation. It's that is pretty darn cool.
And what's great about it as well is that, say, for example, a lot of people ask, well, what if they don't show up for the second webinar? Well, that's fine because they've signed up already. You have their email address, and then you can send them the replay of that second webinar, and they can watch it at their own leisure. You can give them we had a special offer the day of the webinar that you missed, but we have a second offer that's a little bit more, but it's still discounted, that's open for 48 hours or whatever you want to do. And it allows them to watch the replay in their own comfort of their own home and make a decision. when sales is effective, and really good salespeople know this, it's when the actual consumer feels like they're making the decision for themselves and not being coerced or feeling the urgency to do something right now or their life is going to be over. When they feel like they're making a smart decision, they feel like they're in control, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Michael very well, and I know that he expects quality. So that says a lot about the Webinar Ninja platform.
Well,
I
was very
he's not easily pleased, but
I was very fortunate to get to know Michael over the course of the year, and he's a mentor to me because he's taught me so much about public speaking and business as well. I look at his business model. I went to his event and I had the honor to speak there, and I just told him, listen, I'm extremely jealous of how well you put your team together. I want to pick your brain on how you found these people and how I can do the same, And he's just a brilliant mind. He's really helped me a lot. He's an excellent teacher. That's something I really respect about him. He knows how to teach. He knows how to give feedback in a very precise way. And he's really opened my eyes to how to be a great presenter, how to really refine my craft. And I'm trying to get better every day. And I'm just very happy to be working with him and having him as one of our major users.
Yeah, good guy to have in your corner, that's for sure. Now, Omar, you have accomplished a lot, okay? And your business is growing. But, it wasn't always easy. Everything's not easy, right? Sometimes on the outside, it's easy to look at someone. And but I know, like, as an example, I know you had a previous podcast called People Who Know Their Shit. And by your own admission, it wasn't a huge success.
Yeah.
So one thing I like to do on the Amplified Expert podcast is I like to touch on what I think is the biggest obstacle that keeps people from reaching their best, their peak in what they do, and that is fear. That is their apprehension about being who they are fully in their business. So, what can you share with the listeners about what you learned, over the years, things that didn't work, that might help inspire them to keep going on when everything's not going as they had planned?
I love this question, and it's actually really timely because Nicole and I are giving a speech here on Saturday at Podcast San Diego, and the title of the speech is Failed Podcast to Best of iTunes and How You Can Do It Too. And we talk about this whole process of what we learned through that failure. And I do believe that we are successful now because of that failure. And there's a couple of things I want to mention that are very, very important, and something it took me a very long time to fully understand, but I finally got around to understand. One thing is that if you're an entrepreneur of any sort, if you're a coach or a client, you're doing products, whatever it is, I really believe you really need to make sure you understand that your whole goal is to be successful as an entrepreneur. That is your goal. Unfortunately, when we first get started, we get very stubborn about certain things. We think that this business has to be successful. This product has to sell well. This little thing, if it doesn't do well, it's all over and I'm a failure. It's okay to fail at these little things. Even if your whole business is a failure and you have to restart it, or that podcast or that web show or that blog, whatever it is, that's fine. That's part of the journey. You haven't failed because your whole mission, your whole goal again, is to be a successful entrepreneur. And sometimes you're going to have these little failures along the way, but that doesn't make you a failure, because my goal is to be successful as an entrepreneur. And sometimes you got to be flexible. A lot of people, we get very stubborn. We don't want to change our business model or business ideas. You got to see what the audience wants, because at the end of the day, you do not exist without your audience. You do not have a business without your audience. So you have to serve them and be flexible. So that's my kind of first thing, is make sure you understand that that's the goal. And if you fail here or there, it's okay. Pick up the pieces, learn from it. Business is about moving forward. It's about, sometimes you got to be very clinical about things. Sometimes there's no time for you to have an emotional experience. There's no time for you to feel sorry for yourself sometimes, because you got to just pick up the pieces and say, that didn't work. Let's see why it didn't work out. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is what I got to do different this time. Change, move my position, and keep moving forward. The second thing I would say about the failure that we learned from that podcast, People Who Know Their Shit, and in fact, it was shit, and we had, on a good day, a 400 listeners an episode, which was a very good day for us. And for us, it was a start, and we really didn't see it as successful as we wanted it to be. We believed in the podcasting platform, but, we learned a lot of hard lessons. Some of them are universal. One of them is, we realized that we were not utilizing our strengths. As an interview show, I'm not great at interviewing. I don't have that kind of experience. And, I like conversation, but it's not my forte. I do have experience in teaching. I am a teacher. I am an educator. I know how to put a lesson together. This is what my master's is in. This is what I spent my whole adult life doing. I think it would have been a good idea if I utilized that skill in my business. And that's what I did with the $100 MBA show. It's a lesson-based show, 10 minutes a day. We have business lessons on a daily basis. So I utilized my strengths because, not everybody has the same background as I do, and I should leverage that. And a lot of people, they neglect their professional past when they go into entrepreneurship. They say, oh, that's who I was. Now I'm a business person. I want to be this person. You can use those skills and use it to your advantage because not everybody had that history. You can take that history and use it to your advantage. And then thirdly, I think for me is I don't think sometimes we allow ourselves to think bigger about our business or our project or what we're working on. In my example with the podcast, I just thought it was something that people did and it's a good idea and just put it out there and, content everywhere. And I realized through the failure that no, if I want to do this properly, I have to see this as a production. When somebody wants to do a hit show on Netflix, for example, or on TV, let's say, for example, Breaking Bad, right? Breaking Bad is a huge, huge success. They didn't just say, hey, let's just knock it out in a weekend. Let's get some actors together, right? They sat down. They thought about the story. What about this character? What can we do different about this character? I mean, if nobody watches the show, what's unique about Breaking Bad, what makes it different from every other show is that it's the first time you see a character evolve throughout the seasons and becomes a completely different person than what he was in the first episode of episode 1. And you just get so attached to that character and the character development of the other characters that support him. So that's a well-planned execution. That's something that, and not to mention the production value of that show. They've implemented so many techniques that a lot of other shows are picking up, in terms of camera angles and storytelling without any script and all that stuff. So you got to see the podcast. I had to see the podcast that way. I had to see the podcast as a larger production, as I need a better, system. I need a better, format. My content has to be, in a better level of quality. If you look at the podcast, if I want to be one of the best iTunes podcasts, I got to look at what the best of iTunes do. Look at Mark Maron. Mark Maron is incredible. His format lends him to his comedic self. He has a monologue in the beginning, and then he does an interview. So he gets the chance to share what he knows and what he feels about a topic because he knows he has a lot to say, but he doesn't want to interrupt the guest. So he just gets it out of his system in the beginning. So he uses his format to benefit him. You look at somebody like Alec Baldwin. Here's the thing, a very popular podcast where he interviews celebrities, incredible talent. I've had voice lessons because I wanted to, improve my instrument because I have an audio show. It doesn't make any sense for me not to try to improve the way I use my voice. Alec Baldwin, you better believe that guy has had voice lessons, because he takes his craft seriously. And I think that's the advice I would give is take this and think bigger about your production. Think bigger about your project. And see it, no matter, even if it's free content, see it as a product launch. They're not giving you money, but they're giving you time and subscriptions. And that equals trust, which is priceless.
Man, that is some great advice right there. A couple of things that come to mind for me, is that number one, and it seems so obvious, is to stay within our strengths, right? I mean, to really spend at least a few minutes thinking about what we're good at. Mm-hmm. And find a way to stay within that area of strength. And it's funny because we've all done it. I mean, I've done it. We've all, gone outside of that and found ourselves struggling. And it's no wonder, it's no wonder why. And the other thing you mentioned that I think is very, very important, it's kind of funny. I think about my days back in the bricks and mortar side of business, in the real world, so to speak. And, it's funny when you start a business out in that world, you expect it to be hard. Mm-hmm. You expect to work hard. You expect to have put a lot of effort in to have success. I think on people who are running primarily an online business have been done a big disservice by a lot of the get-rich-quick folks out there. Mm. And I think they've really gotten some people to believe that it should be a lot easier. But, a lot of times it comes down to just working hard, doesn't it?
I mean, that's a really well put statement, because I think a lot of people see entrepreneurship as like this quick, easy way to make money. And I think that nothing could be further from the truth, because you never stop learning, you never stop growing as an entrepreneur. I mean, if somebody, let's take an average career, an accountant, somebody who's an accountant, they go to college for 4 years, they get their CPA, and when they graduate, they're still a rookie. They still are not good at accounting. They take a while to get better. So they may put 5, 6, 7 years into it to be decent, and you can't expect, a lot of people are expecting to be a great entrepreneur within 5 or 6 months. It's a journey, and I've been doing this for 14 years. I was doing it part-time when I was an educator full-time, and I've been doing it full-time for over 3 years now. And it's not for the faint-hearted. It's somebody who really wants something bad. I've spoken to a lot of entrepreneurs along the way. I have a chance to become friends with some of them, and they all have that in common. They want it bad, and you got to want it bad. And if you don't want it bad, that's okay. I've had a student, this may be not the best testimonial, but it's the truth. I had a student at the $100 MBA who took our course, loved the course, enjoyed all the lessons, emailed me personally and said, you know what, Omar, I think that I love your course, and I was really into entrepreneurship, but one of the things I learned is that this is not for me. I think I just need a new job, and I think I'll be better once I get a new job. And I thank you for opening my eyes to what really entrepreneurship is and what it involves. And that, to me, is just as strong as a testimonial to somebody who does build a successful business, because, people get to understand what it takes. And if you see what it takes and see what it involves, and it motivates you, and you say, yeah, I want it, I'm going to go for it, then I applaud you, and I encourage you to move forward.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
No, I think you gave that person a huge gift. Absolutely. So, and I think just to touch on one more point around that, and you said it just a few minutes ago, and that is, you have to think big. You have to have a bigger vision, because that every day we're going to have challenges. Every day things are going to come up. There's going to be days where not enough people, attended our webinar, or not enough people bought our new course. And, we have to have a vision that drives us to where we're just going to get up and do it again. We're going to get up and do it again. Now, we're going to assess what we did. We're going to adjust as necessary, but we're going to keep getting up and going after it because we have a big enough vision. And I think that is critical.
Yeah, and I do think that, this is not just you're doing it blindly. You're actually sitting down and analyzing and trying to learn from your mistakes. At the same time, you also have to focus on the reality of the situation. Like the reality, you may be in a situation right now where you feel like, I just need enough money to pay my bills because, I have a part-time job, or whatever your situation is, where you just need to make X amount of dollars. And you just need to focus maybe on what are the things that are going to bring in my revenue? How can I create content that can build trust in a certain way? How can I invest my time so I can get to that breaking point where it's like, okay, now I'm making enough money, I can exhale a little bit, and now I can start planning for the future. Sometimes you just got to deal with reality first, and then once you've kind of taken care of that, you can focus on other things where you can expand. And that's why I was talking about focus. Focus is very important, to just look at your situation and see what needs care right now.
Yeah, speaking of focus, you're obviously a very focused guy, and I'm going to circle back to Webinar Ninja in a second, but I wanted to ask you, again, you're productive. Do you have any productivity hacks, or I mean, even more specifically, do you have a morning routine or evening routine that you do? Anything, just within a minute or so that you can share that might be helpful to the listeners to be more productive?
Yeah. So one of the things I do is we plan the day, the next day, the night before. So for example, tomorrow I would plan it tonight. And what happens, and I learned this from Mike Vardy, who's from The Productiviest, and he's a very good guy when it comes to productivity. And it models the day like the lifetime of a human being. When you wake up in the morning, you're full of energy, you're like a baby, and you tend to just like wander around and check out, Facebook or whatever. And you're very, you got the energy to do things. And if you don't have direction, you can squander the best hours of your day. Right. And what happens is that as you go out throughout the day, at the end of the day, you're like an old person. You're wise. You you look back and like, wow, I really wasted time there, or I did this wrong, or I didn't get this done, and you can really reflect on it. So it's a good time for you to plan is at the end of the day to plan for the next day, and that really helps. I'm big on lists. I'd like to do like a to-do list for the day, for the week, for the month, and I like to have it handy. But I don't like it in my face when I'm working, and I talk about this in an episode of the $100 MBA show, talking about dealing with overwhelm in your business. And one of the things that people do is they have a checklist right in front of them, but every time they look down, every time they look on their screen or wherever it is, if it's in sight, it doesn't give them relief of the overwhelm. So what you need to do is you have that list, you can flip it over, put it behind you, whatever, and then when you finish your task, go back to the list, cross it out, flip it over again, and just work one task at a time. Focus and chip at it. And often that overwhelming feeling will start to go away once you start working. But you often don't get any relief if you just see this long list. And even if you have one or two things crossed out, it still makes you feel anxious. So I would recommend putting that list away and then going back at it when you need to cross something out. So those are just 2 quick tips.
Yeah, no, I like that because you're exactly right. When you're looking at a list, it just makes you anxious as can be. One thing I love about getting more done, and I think this applies to every human being, is that when we actually accomplish things that are on our list, it makes us a lot more confident, which is important. Well,
yeah, it definitely makes you feel like, I've done it. I've made it. I can do things.
Yeah, it's easier to get the next thing done. Absolutely. Well, hey, I wanted to get back to Webinar Ninja because you've created this brand new solution, and I know you're launching right in April.
Yeah, so we just opened up pre-sales about a month ago, and all our founding members who buy it in pre-sale period will get an early release in late April. And for those who don't become a founding member, they will have to wait until early May when we launch it to the public. So if somebody is looking to get a complete solution on a webinar solution, we're offering this special price as well as early release.
Yeah, and there are a ton of great features and, of course, the benefits that go along with them. And I won't go through all of them. We're going to obviously put the links in the show notes, but I know that you supply a ton of pre-designed pages. You're able to track and measure within the software. And plus, if you don't mind, Omar, real quick, would you touch on, because I know the software can do obviously webinars, also does recorded events. You talk about using it for meetings. Can you just maybe touch on the versatility of the platform?
Sure. Just to back up, the reason why we created Webinar Ninja, like 16 months ago, Nicole and I were doing webinars ourselves for the $100 MBA, for our community, and it was a little difficult. We had a hard time because there's no real complete solution. Either it does the webinar, but it doesn't do replays, or it doesn't manage email properly, or it's a very ad hoc solution, or you would go and get your landing pages from one place and you have to plug in Google Hangouts in one place and then put your chat in another place. So you have bills coming from left and right and you have to make sure everything works perfectly. So we just got frustrated with what was out there. So I actually contacted a developer that I worked with before with some stuff on our site, and I had him create a very simple solution, which we called Webinar Ninja at the time. We actually didn't name it at the time. We just built it for ourselves. And I started doing webinars with it. And our audience members were asking, like, what are you using for your webinar? This is really cool. And I said, oh, it's just something I put together, just because I wanted to do webinars properly. And they said, well, I would like to buy it. Can you offer it? And, I kind of said, yeah, sure. And I just kind of didn't think about it until we started getting a very strong response from people. So we started to just release it on beta. And mind you, it looked very different than what it's looking now, what it looks like now. And, we just learned a lot through the 16 months of not only creating the software and offering it to our beta users, and it actually originated as a WordPress plugin, and then we realized that we're limited to the capabilities of what we can do being on somebody else's server if you're installing it on your site. So we decided to like go back to the drawing board, take some of the feedback that we've gotten from our users, from our big players like Michael Port, and say, okay, let's see what we can do, and let's put it on a server, because when you put it on a server, I can put it on a cloud-based server like Amazon is a very robust and it's very fast. I don't have to deal with, making sure everybody has an updated version of the software. It'll be updated automatically, and you just log in on a web browser just like you would do on Facebook or MailChimp. And that was really when we started to learn so much from our users, not only in terms of the software, but in terms of what they struggle with and how we can help them with those struggles through the software itself, as well as the community and providing tutorials and lessons on how to present and teach and sell on a webinar, because a lot of people, that's their biggest fear. What am I going to say on this thing? And if I can provide that information, I can get them to get over their fears and be able to start a webinar, and hopefully with our platform. So we kind of worked from the ground up, and we learned a lot of needs in the market and needs from our actual audience members that do webinars on a regular basis. So some of the things I think differentiate us from maybe what's out there, or maybe that's not even out there yet, is a few things. One, we really are invested in great design. We want to make sure that your brand is represented properly. So all our design from the back end as well as the front end, obviously the registration pages, the thank you pages, the webinar pages themselves, they look brilliant. They look professional. They don't look generic. You can modify things. You can modify colors. You can modify the text. You can make them your own. You could put up your own logo in the banner so that you have a completely customized look and it looks just like your own brand and colors and all that stuff. So that's one thing. We wanted to make sure that we represented ourselves in a way that's very professional, as well as is pleasing to the eye, because it's what people first see. It's their first impression. So that's one. Two is we also wanted to make sure the functionality of it is very easy for people to do. It's step by step. There's video instructions right throughout the step by step process of creating a webinar, and as well as running the webinar. A lot of people, when they're running a webinar, they have like 1,000 screens open. They have this tab open, they have the chat going on, and it's really hard to manage. So inside the Webinar Ninja software, we have an area called the studio. And in the studio, you can control, one, your actual video feed where you run the Google Hangouts. You can manage your chat, so you can get questions sent to you directly from the chat. So in the chat area inside the webinar, an audience member can send you a direct question, and you can get all your questions inside your dashboard. So you can read out those questions, and it's easier to do that than filter through the chat and find questions. We have a separate area for that so people can meet and greet and get to know each other. But if they have a question, you should be able to see that immediately, and that's why we have this direct question feature. One of the other features that we got through just our beta testing and learning from our audience is sometimes you're going to get people that are just belligerent, that are just don't belong in the webinar. They're just being a hater, really. And a lot of webinar softwares don't allow you to kick them out, and kick them out of not only the chat, but the whole webinar. And we have that feature inside our studio area. And it allows you just to control everything from one admin. Another thing we're very excited about that is really game-changing in webinars is we're allowing people. So when you register for a webinar, typically what happens in the available solutions currently is you register for the webinar on a registration page. So you give your name and you give your email address, and you get an email confirmation through an autoresponder system where it says, hey, thanks for signing up for the webinar. Here's the link to the webinar. Now, often what can happen is people can just share that link with their friends, and they wouldn't have to register. So what we are doing is that we are giving the link, but when you go to the link, you have to sign in. You sign in with your name and the email address you registered with. Now, when you sign in, it does two things. One, it registers you into the chat automatically. So your name is into the chat, and you're into the chat already, and you're signed in. Two, it verifies that you're an actual user and that you've entered the chat, and that way people are going in that are registered. And if they're not registered, we have a prompt that says, hey, if you haven't registered, you can register here. So it allows you to obviously work on your email list building, as well as keep it private and keep it exclusive. Now, the kicker that I love about this system is now that we know which users are registering and when they're registering, it allows you to know who attended the webinar, who didn't attend the webinar, when they attended, when they dropped off. So when you go into our email notification systems, we have templates ready for you that you can send out to those specific groups. So you can go to a specific webinar that you did, and you can say, I want to send a specific email right inside the software. You don't have to go to your autoresponder. You can just send emails right inside of Webinar Ninja and say, hey guys, I noticed that, you didn't attend this webinar, or you left midway. Here's the replay. Is there any questions I can answer? or you can send an email to those who did attend and say, thanks for attending. Remember, the offer is so-and-so. So it allows you to really communicate directly with them and know exactly what happened. And that way you can give specific emails rather than blanket emails to everybody. So these are just some of the features that we have in Webinar Ninja. Of course, it's mobile responsive, which is a huge problem for some people. And you can use it on a tablet, on a phone. You can be able to use it, obviously, on a laptop and a computer. And it's not just software. We have a whole community where people can meet, greet each other, share, tips, maybe help each other out, and be co-hosting on their webinars together, as well as tutorials on not only how to teach and present, but also how to use the software and how to best utilize the software in a way that, depending on what you're doing. So if you're a solo host or if you're co-hosting the actual webinar, we have different lesson plans for those situations for you to actually implement and use as a template.
Man, sounds like an all-in-one marketing and sales solution for, I like easy. And I know a lot of the people listening to this show like easy, and sounds like you made webinars easy.
Well, that was a goal. I mean, we knew that if it's not easy, people are not going to use it. And that's really the apprehension. A lot of people don't start webinars because it's overwhelming. Like, where do I start? What do I do? How do I get the video to work? Like, there's so many questions. When there's so many questions, often you're just like, oh, forget it. I'll work on it when I have time. But when you can answer those questions or you can solve those issues by saying it's handled, it's all inclusive, it's all easy, and we have tutorials, it makes it easier for people to just jump on board and give it a try.
Man, this is absolutely awesome. So again, everybody listening, the software launches next month. So Omar, where do people need to go to find out more about the Webinar Ninja software?
Sure. They can go to webinarninja.co. Currently, we have a special offer. If they want to join as a founding member, meaning somebody who's an early adopter, we have a special offer going on, which is $245 a year. We have an annual subscription to the software. That includes the training and support and unlimited updates as long as you're a member. And you can lock in that rate for the rest of your life as long as you're a member. As long as you don't discontinue your membership, you can get that rate of $245 a year. What happens is, as a founding member, you get a couple bonuses. You get some exclusive registration pages, as well as you get early access to the software in late April. So if you pre-order now, you get the access to the software in late April, while the public will get it in early May, mid-May. And you're just part of the early community, and it makes a huge difference when you're part of a large community and you're one of the first people. So that's, you can learn more at webinarninja.co. If you go to webinarninja.co/show, that's our podcast, Webinar Ninja, and you can learn about what we're doing with the podcast. A lot of great things you can learn, regardless of you use Webinar Ninja or not. There's lots of things you can learn about webinars on that podcast. On the site, we have a video as well to give you a more inclusive and complete idea of what Webinar Ninja can do for you.
Omar Zenhom, it has been an absolute pleasure. And where else? Now, obviously, everybody needs to get over to iTunes and they need to check out both of your stellar podcasts and go check out Webinar Ninja. Now, is there anywhere else they should go just to say hi to you, or is that just the best? Are those the best places to go?
Yeah, I mean, they can go to 100mba.net. That's $100 MBA. That's our website there, where you can check out our podcast there, our daily podcast. And I usually tell people if you're getting started in entrepreneurship or you're just kind of stuck, the podcast can really help you out. And you could subscribe. It's free. It's a good way for you to get to know me and to get to know you. If you have any questions, you can send them over via email at contact@100mba.net. We answer them right on the show. We give you a shout out, and we'd love for you to be a part of our community and learn more from us. And it's a growing show, and we're happy to have anybody on board, and we appreciate any of our listeners that are listening.
Well, thanks a bunch again for carving out some time for us today. It is greatly appreciated. I know I learned a ton today, so thank you, sir.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate the time and the opportunity. I think you're doing some great stuff, and I applaud you for all your hard work.
Thanks, Omar. Everybody listening, thank you. We appreciate you, and remember to live amplified.
Thanks for listening to the Amplified Expert Podcast. Find the archives for this show at davidjalen.com/podcast or on iTunes. Contact David at davidjalen.com and remember to live amplified. Amplified.